It is an unprecedented and very public humiliation. Boris Johnson has been shamed for deliberately misleading Parliament over a string of illegal parties in Downing Street during lockdown. In its long-awaited report, the House of Commons Privileges Committee reveals in brutal detail how the former Prime Minister lied repeatedly and was complicit in a campaign of abuse against the MPs charged with judging him. It found he'd shown contempt for Parliament itself and would have received a 90-day suspension from the House had he not already quit. But Mr Johnson remains defiant, once again refusing to accept any of the findings, calling the report a load of complete tripe and making highly personal attacks on members of the committee that condemned him. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Astana, on the devastating report and the reaction to it.
It is an extraordinary fall from grace. Boris Johnson took the Conservative Party to its biggest election win in decades. He achieved his ambition of Britain leaving the EU. He was Prime Minister when the country entered its greatest crisis since the Second World War. But today...
Is this the end, Mr Johnson?
He was effectively run out of Parliament. The Privileges Committee said it would have suspended Boris Johnson for 90 days, which can trigger a by-election, if he hadn't resigned first. Their explosive findings landed at 9 a.m.
The Privileges Committee is there to defend this House. We asked them to do this work, and as many members have pointed out, it had a Conservative majority on it.
On Monday, MPs will get a free vote on that report that today concluded that when Boris Johnson said that guidance was followed completely in Number 10, he misled Parliament. When he failed to tell MPs about his own knowledge of the gatherings, he misled Parliament. When he claimed to rely on repeated assurances that rules had not been broken, he also misled Parliament. And they accused him of being complicit in a campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee.
That the evidence I shall give for this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Boris Johnson said he had engaged with the Privileges Committee despite being warned that it was a kangaroo court. He claimed members, and especially the chair, Labour's Harriet Harman, had already expressed prejudicial views. In an angry statement, almost 1,700 words long, he slammed the conclusions as rubbish, deranged, ludicrous, preposterous and an assassination. He used the word absurd 3 times. For many Conservative MPs, this is good riddance.
It's over, Boris, if you're watching.
But others said it was a stitch-up.
I think it's spiteful, vindictive and overreaching, quite frankly.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, now Sir Jacob, thanks to Boris Johnson, was also unimpressed.
I think the 90-day suspension was simply vindictive.
He argued it was unfair. Is this it for Boris Johnson's political career?
No, because the great thing about our system, ultimately the people in charge are the voters, and I have a feeling that if Boris Johnson stands in the constituency at the next election, voters will be very keen to send him back to Parliament, and then this report becomes an irrelevance.
The committee met over 40 times to discuss evidence, including photographs like these, that they said clearly contradicted what Mr Johnson had told MPs. In one submission to the committee, a Number 10 official claimed that Downing Street was like an island oasis of normality during COVID, that wine time Fridays continued, that social distancing and mask wearing wasn't enforced, and that staff were emailed to be warned to be careful of cameras outside the door. The Prime Minister was, conveniently perhaps, only out and about before publication on a police immigration raid, but no comment on Boris Johnson's rule-breaking.
You're talking about a report that I haven't seen and no one else has seen. It wouldn't be right to comment on it in advance of it coming out and being published.
We've heard enough about it. Boris Johnson has stepped down because we know what the report has said. If you're not willing to talk about it now, are you willing to do an interview with us after the report comes out, once you had a chance to read it?
As you say, you're talking about a report that I haven't seen.
That's a no then, but Labour wasn't holding back. Angela Rayner defended the Privileges Committee.
Their job is to find the truth and to put forward the report, which is what they've done. And to try and discredit them when he's the discredited one is a disgraceful pattern of behaviour and it cannot be allowed to stand.
These MPs were always going to suspend Boris Johnson for long enough to trigger a by-election, but they went for 90 days after he angered them by publicly responding to a confidential draft of the report. A report that has brought an end to a dramatic political career, for now at least. In reality, the number of MPs vocally supporting Boris Johnson has diminished in recent months. Far more of the Conservatives I speak to in here want this controversy to go away. One said to me, we need the psychodrama to end, and that's because they're worried about the impact it's having on their party. A YouGov poll for ITV suggests that 78% of people who voted Tory in the last election now think the party is divided. Rishi Sunak knows how damaging that is. That's why he said on the day he became Prime Minister, we need to unite or die.
Anushka Astana in Westminster, thank you. Well, the report from the Privileges Committee runs to 106 pages. We've read it, so you don't have to. So let's get more details from our UK editor, Paul Brand, who, of course, helped to expose the original Partygate scandal. Paul.
Well, Mary, this is, of course, the third investigation to find Boris Johnson partied during lockdown, but the first to conclude that he also lied, and repeatedly. Here's when. On the 1st of December 2021, the Daily Mirror had just published rumours of parties in Number 10. Boris Johnson told MPs at Prime Minister's questions that day all guidance was followed. The committee concluded that was a lie. A week later, ITV News had just broadcast this video of Downing Street staff joking about a Christmas party, which blew the scandal wide open. This time at PMQs, he stated, I have been repeatedly assured that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken. The committee concluded that that was a second lie. Then in January, following revelations broadcast on ITV News about a garden party in Number 10, Boris Johnson told MPs it could be said technically to fall within the guidance. Once more, the committee concluded that he had lied. There were other incidences too, but why was it deliberately misleading and not accidental? Well, the committee points to Boris Johnson's direct personal experience of non-compliance. In other words, he went to the parties, he must have known they didn't comply with the rules. And they rejected his argument that senior staff had assured him that no rules had been broken. The only assurances that we can be certain were given to Mr Johnson were from two media advisers, they conclude. Boris Johnson claims the committee is, in his words, a kangaroo court. But does that hold any truth? Well, firstly, most of its members are Conservative MPs, hardly a political witch hunt. As for Boris Johnson's talk of a Remainer plot, well, in fact, every one of our many sources who blew the whistle over Partygate voted both for Brexit and for Boris Johnson.
I mean, personally, I still am pro-Brexit. People haven't been conspiring in groups within Number 10, within the government to actively, plot and conspire against the then Prime Minister. To say it was organised, it was set up, is total rubbish.
Well, the former Prime Minister will continue to contest that, but we now have a police investigation, a Cabinet Office investigation and a Privileges Committee report, all tainting, Mary, his relationship with the truth.
Fascinating stuff. Paul, thank you very much.